Hey guys, it's Susan here with Backyard Garden Live. We had some technical issues again today. I do apologize. We surely hope to get these ironed out for our next meeting. I hope that some of you have hung around for today's show, and I'll wait for you maybe to give me a thumbs up or let me know that you're here before I dig into our content for today. So happy Friday, everybody, and I hope that you have great gardening weather where you are. I know that things are improving greatly here in the mountains of Arizona. Hey guys, hey Roger, hey Talia. So good to see that some people are here. Again, I totally apologize for the technical difficulties. There's some new software issues that we're having trouble with. So at any rate, glad to see a couple of you here, and let me know if you can hear and see me okay. Roger, you're in Glendale. That's a hot place to garden. I spent a year in Phoenix and didn't get a chance to have a garden, but hope to have one down there soon. So welcome. And again, my name is Susan. I am a garden enthusiast of sort and very blessed to be the author of 4 best-selling garden books: The Hydroponic Garden Secret, The Secret Garden, The Instant Box Garden Miracle, and The Backyard Harvest. If you haven't gotten copies of my books, the links will be below this video, and I encourage you to pick up a copy of those books when you can. Last week, we talked about some really basic gardening principles that even if you're not a newcomer to gardening, it's a good idea and it's a good thing to revisit these things once in a while. If you missed last week's show, you can see it in our library and our playlist. But one thing I talked about was the fact that gardening is a journey, not a destination. We don't set out just to create a garden and then set it and forget it. We're always fooling and playing and changing different things around with it. And I'm always learning new things. Every mistake I make is an opportunity for me to learn something new, and every success I have is an opportunity for me to also learn something new. So this is how we grow as gardeners, and it's especially encouraging when you're a new gardener to know that you will make some mistakes and you will learn from them. So one thing I did talk about last week that I want to revisit again is this whole idea that plants are our friends. They have everything in their DNA to want to be successful. They want to grow, they want to be healthy, and our job as gardeners is to do the best job we can, to give them what they need, to assess what they need, and then give them what they need at the right time. So for new gardeners, that should be encouraging. Plants want to work with you, not against you. So that's something I just want to hammer home. With that said, what I want to do today in the time that we have left here is talk a little bit about soil and the importance of feeding your soil, and that soil is the foundation for healthy plants. In 3 of my books, I talk a lot about soil. And how if we want to have big, beautiful flowers, amazing produce, healthy herbs, really great fruit, we need to have really healthy soil. It is the foundation. And so an important thing is to not think about soil as dirt. Think about it as a microscopic world teeming with organisms that breathe life into your garden. There's earthworms, insects, fungi, all sorts of beneficial bacteria, and they all act like this really hungry recycling crew that converts dead leaves and plant debris into nutrients that plants can use. So we need to think of our soil as being alive. And unfortunately, much of the produce that we find in grocery stores has been grown in subpar soil. It's depleted in nutrients. That means our food is depleted in nutrients, and it can even contain unsafe levels of heavy metals and other toxins. So this is just not something that we want to feed our families, and it's another amazing reason why we need to be growing our own food. So today, if you have questions, about today's topic, please feel free to put them in the comment section. And if I don't get to them today, I'll go through them and either answer them online or get to them next week during the program. I see that, Talia, you have a question about neem oil, the pros and cons. I actually do use neem oil very sparingly in my garden, but I can try to address that at the end of the show. And if not, I will definitely get a response written to you so that I can explain how I do use it. So here's a couple questions from last week that I promised I would get to. So one of our viewers last week asked, they'd like to grow their own food, but they're concerned about toxins transferring to their food. So that's what I was just referring to with the grocery store food. Now, interestingly enough, researchers at Johns Hopkins University Center for a Livable Future conducted a survey of 70 urban gardens across Baltimore. And what they found was low levels of heavy metal and organic chemical contaminants in the soil. So if you live in an urban area or you're not quite sure about maybe a factory that's close to your land, things could have leached into the soil. The best solution that I have to offer for that is to go to a raised bed or a container garden. That way you can control the soil and the quality of the soil, and there's no guessing. You're not worried about what might be in the soil and leaching into your food. So always go with a raised bed or a container garden. Kimberly Peters last week asked, when do you need to put new soil in your containers? So that's an interesting topic too, because we're talking about soil. So I typically change out the soil once a year. There's really no hard and fast rule about this, but I generally change it out every year and I toss it into my vegetable garden. I've just found that my pots do better with fresh soil each year. A lot of times when I pull out the soil from the previous year, I can see roots and other debris from the plants that were in the pot the year before. And I don't really want to put another plant into that might struggle with that and be in competition with that other debris that's in the pot. So I feel pretty good about just tossing the old soil into my garden beds. I work it up with some compost and they seem to do great. I like to make my own potting soil too, instead of using pre-bagged. And if you want to, I can leave this in the notes too, but I use 6 gallons of coconut coir fiber, 4.5 gallons of perlite, 6 gallons of compost, and 1.5 cups of granular complete organic fertilizer of your choice, just something that's organic, and mix it all in there together. And it is an amazing mixture to put in your, not only your raised beds, your elevated beds, your box gardens, but also in your container gardens. So Talia says compost, I've tried to do that, but I must not know what I'm doing. It always goes rotten on me, so I end up throwing it away. Easiest way to compost. Yes, we're going to talk about compost. I'm going to probably have a show on compost, and what happens often is compost can go wrong or bad for a couple of reasons. It can be that we're not layering the brown and the green, the dead and the live, in the right order or the right amounts in our compost pile. But mostly what happens to people is they don't aerate it, they don't spin it, they don't turn it, they don't wet it, and then it just kind of sits there and rots. So there are some really good tricks to keeping compost. Now, compost can also just be your leaf debris, your yard debris, your old leaves in your garden or in your yard. You can use that and throw that in your beds too, because that's organic material that will break down. But good question about the compost, and we'll have probably a whole show on compost and how to successfully compost things in your kitchen and then take them out to a bigger compost out in your yard or your garden area. So when we talk about soil, this is what I want to get granular about here today. All soils are a mixture of mineral particles. So that includes clay, sand, and silt. So often they'll contain higher amounts of one or the other of these. And it doesn't necessarily make them a bad growing medium, but what it does is it affects their density, their drainage rate, and their capacity to hold nutrients. So each has its pros and cons. For instance, clay soils have really tiny, dense particles that hold a large amount of moisture and nutrients. But they also drain really, really slowly, and they can get really hard and compacted. If you've got clay soil, you know how hard it is to plant. It gets really hard and compacted when you try to plant in it. Sandy soils are just the opposite. Everything rushes through sandy soil, right? Large particles, they move right through, along with all of your nutrients that you really need for healthy plants. Silts are really fine particle size, and they pack together tightly, but they don't allow for good drainage or good air circulation, which plants need as well. Loam is the best. So it's the best soil for most plants. It contains a balance of all three mineral particles, and it's really rich in humus, or what's known as the organic matter that's been decomposed. So it's alive. I mean, it is the most alive soil that you can possibly have. Now, how do you know what kind of soil you have? So there's a couple different ways you can test this. What I like to do is take a handful of moist but not soaking wet soil from the garden and squeeze it with your open hand. Now, if it holds its shape, but it kind of crumbles when you poke it, and it's kind of like nice crumbly granola toppings maybe on your yogurt, then it's really, really good for retaining moisture and nutrients. However, if you poke at it and poke at it and poke at it, and it holds its shape, it's probably nutrient rich, but really slow draining clay. So if that's what soil you have and what you're working with, add mulch, organic matter, perlite, vermiculite. They'll loosen it up a little bit and put some air pockets in there and spaces, so things will it will drain better. So now, if the soil just kind of falls apart when you open your hand, that means it's really sandy and it's not going to hold nutrients and moisture very well. You're going to want to add a lot of nutrient-rich compost. Steer manure is a great one that I swear by, into this to help it retain the moisture. Okay, now here's another test that you need to do. You need to do what's called a percolation test. How well is it draining? Because a lot of plants don't like what's called wet feet. They don't want to be drowning in the water unless they're bog plants. So here's what you can do to test if you've got drainage problems or not. You've got an area where you want to plant a garden, and you're thinking about it. Well, don't plant, but go out and dig a hole that's about 6 inches wide and a foot deep. Okay, fill it with water and let it drain out entirely. Fill it again, and then keep track of how long it takes for the water to drain. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if it takes more than 4 hours to drain, then you don't have very good drainage, and you're going to want to amend that so that it drains better, or pick another spot in to have your garden. Now, this test right here is one of my favorite. It's called the worm test. Okay, worms are a really good indicator of the overall health of your soil, especially all that alive biological activity that I talked about. If you have earthworms in your soil, the chances are that you also have additional beneficial microbes and bacteria that make for really healthy soil and super strong plants. So for the worm test, you want to wait until your soil is about 55, even 60 degrees, and it's kind of moist but not soaking wet. So you're going to dig a hole 1 foot across, 1 foot deep, and you're going to place that soil that you dig out on a tarp, or I even use like a piece of cardboard or something. So sift through that with your hands, and as you place the dirt back into the hole, count the earthworms. Now, if you have 10 earthworms, it means your soil's in pretty good shape. Less than that, you may need to have more organic matter to support a healthy worm population. The other problem might be your soil might be either too acidic or too alkaline. So that won't support that biological activity that we want to see in the soil. So that's the test number 4, okay, for healthy soil, is a pH test. It's just going to check the acidity level of your soil, and you can buy these pH meters online. They're cheap. They're great to have. The pH is a scale from 0 to 14. 0 is very acidic and 14 is alkaline. And most plants want a neutral pH, 6.5, 7-ish. And when the pH is lower than 5 or higher than 8, they're just not going to grow as well as they should, unless they're plants that really like an acidic, acidic hydrangeas, or some plants, rhododendrons, that really don't mind the acidity. So pick up a pH test kit. They're pretty accurate. Now, here's what you can do. If you're new to your soil, if you just moved into your home and you want to plant a garden um, in the ground the conventional way, I encourage people to have do soil samples. So you can get a soil test kit from your cooperative extension office, call them, they'll send one to you, and then it will come back and it'll tell you everything that's good and everything that's bad about your soil and what you might need to add to it or what you might need to do to amend it to make it healthier for growing a garden. So if you're really concerned and you're new to your land, go ahead and do a soil test kit like that and just have to wait a little bit for it to come back. So what do we do? I want to show you first my soil, two different soils that I got here. Okay, so can you guys tell which one is healthy and which one is not? Just by looking at them, you can actually tell that this one here is really light in color and has a lot of rock and is kind of sandy. And this one is rich, dark, ready to be planted in. So even just looking at your soil can sometimes help you determine whether or not it's good or not. So what do we do if we have a poor soil? One of the first things that I recommend people do is add organic matter. Okay, that's the best way, the number one way to improve your soil. Whether you have clay, sandy, it's low in nutrients, it's compacted, poor drainage, organic matter will fix it. Compost is a must. And again, you can purchase, steer manure and other things. So immediately you're going to introduce microorganisms into your soil, and that's going to keep improving your soil as they break down organic matter. Add as much as you can. You can't overdose your garden on compost. There's just no way. You can just keep adding it in there. I like to add it in the spring and put some side dress around your plants when you plant them as they're growing. And it will just help improve the quality of your soil. There's a few other things you can do. Your grass clippings, your autumn leaves, you can shred them with your mower, add them to your garden. Aged manure. I love coffee grounds. All of these things help your garden increase fertility, water retention, and improve texture. So remember, the key is we want to attract as many of those beneficial microbes to our soil. They are partners also in this, in the beautiful journey of gardening. We have the plants that want to do really well, and we have all these microorganisms that are ready to work for us. We just have to create the environment where they're happy. So think about that. We want to have our soil be as alive as possible. Other things that you shouldn't do if you want to have quality soil are reduce, obviously, the amounts of chemical fertilizers and pesticides that you use. These are toxic, and they end up killing off all of these microorganisms that we really want to encourage into our garden because they are toxic. Instead, use less concentrated organic fertilizers and slow release fertilizers, not like a big heavy hit. Fast acting concentrated fertilizers will kill earthworms and other organisms. I like fish fertilizers, fish emulsion, and manures, chicken, cow, horse, as long as they're not green, because then there's too much nitrogen in them. So now, once you have your soil tested and you know whether you have a pH imbalance, when you add that organic matter, it will help balance that pH out as well. And now if you're gardening the conventional way on the ground, many gardeners, they've switched to raised beds now because stepping and pulling wheelbarrows over a garden, it compacts it and it makes it really difficult for roots to grow. So if you do have a garden plot on the ground, make sure to fence it off or put a little rope around it so that people aren't walking all over it in the off season and compacting that dirt. Disrupt the soil as little as possible. There's this saying called no-till gardening, and it's very popular. People, when they till, you're disrupting the soil, you're disrupting the ecosystem as well. So you're turning up all those earthworms, you're turning up weed seeds. And if you till and dig as little as possible, and adding that organic matter to your soil, you're going to preserve that diversity of the microorganisms that are in your soil. So that's really, really important. Oh, hi, Bee. Good to see you. Bee's here. She's a master gardener since 2008. Thanks so much for being here. Virginia. So where in Virginia are you? If you're, I guess, towards the coast or southern part, you're probably ready for gardening now. I spent quite a bit of time in Virginia, so beautiful, beautiful state. So um, those are my tips for healthy soil. Does anyone have any general soil questions? I mean, again, I prefer to garden in raised beds or containers just because I know what I'm putting in my boxes, my soil. I know what my soil is. I know the composition. I know how much coconut coir I'm going to put in, or how much fish emulsion, or how much of any other kind of organic matter, so that I can just create this beautiful combination of healthy soil. Um, so, okay, so Talia, you want to learn more about how to put flowers among veggies. It's really cool, and it's really popular now to grow flowers and veggies together in right in your border of your garden, or make a whole garden that's both flowers and veggies. It's wonderful, and there's a lot of really good companion plants that work well with vegetables and help bring those good pollinators, and some help keep the insects away that cause problems with our veggies. So that is something that we will definitely talk about at some point, is this whole idea of companion planting. I have a question from last week from Mary Hudson, who asked, the only spot I have for a garden faces west. Is that going to work? I don't see that she's here today, but that's a question that a lot of people ask, is what's the best position for my garden? And a west-facing garden is going to get really hot, especially if you live in the South. Of course, that the long hours of sunlight in such a garden are going to make it hard to grow some things, but there's a lot of vegetables that don't object to having that sun in the afternoon. Like leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, cabbage, they don't tolerate the heat so well. So if you've got that west-facing garden, I always would encourage you to put up a sunshade of some kind, or a trellis. But there are things like radish, squash, onions, and peppers. They all love that. They all love the sun. So it's just knowing what to plant in your garden. I had another question also from someone who wanted to know about community supported agriculture, or CSA. Well, there is a huge movement back to buying food and other goods locally, which is amazing. I love what the author and researcher Michael Pollan says. He says that we should be able to shake the hand of the people that feed us. And at one time in our country, that's the way it was. We were either growing our own food exclusively, or sharing within our community, or buying from local farmers. And there's been a resurgent back to farmers markets and community supported agriculture. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's just a system that connects the producer and consumer within the food system more closely. You can subscribe to a harvest. You can actually go to a local farm and pick your own, see how everything is grown, shake the hand of the people who are growing it, and then you really know what you're putting in your body and what you're feeding your family. I'm a big, big fan of CSA if you can't grow your own. Hey, B, yeah, Virginia Beach. I lived in Williamsburg, so for quite a long time. So great that you're here. So Talia, you say, I'm not artistic at all, so I don't know how to be creative. I always say everybody's got a creative spark in them somewhere, just like people who say that they don't have a green thumb. One thing you can do is get inspiration from magazines, garden shows. You can maybe take some paper and just kind of draw out the shape of your garden and think about what you'd like to be able to see out your windows. There's all sorts of fun things that you can do there. But most of the time, if you can't get inspiration about how you want that garden to look, then just do some looking on Pinterest at garden ideas and visuals, and all of that really helps. There's so much information out there. So I encourage you to dig into all that's out there. Okay, so Talia, I'm getting back to your neem oil question now. So neem oil, if you don't know, is made from the seeds of the neem tree, which is native to India. Now, since ancient times, the neem tree's been prized as a sacred remedy, and it's an important ingredient in ancient medical practices. Now, in the garden, it's really powerful as an insecticide. I think my personal opinion is that it's good for controlling a number of problems, including insects like mites, aphids, whitefly, snails, nematodes, mealybugs. It kills them outright and attacks the larvae of others and repels plant problems. Fungus, it's good for, and also for some diseases. Now, it's non-toxic. As long as it isn't sprayed directly on them. Okay, so you can spray it around the plant. Now it's organic, plant-based, easily available. It's biodegradable. That breaks down quickly and leaves no residue. So I know that some people don't like to use it. I don't generally have to use it because here's the thing. Healthy soil means healthy plants, which means your plants are going to be able to resist disease, drought, insect attack. It's just like us. If we have a really strong immune system and we feed our immune system on a regular basis with those things that it needs to be healthy and operate at full capacity, then we are less likely to succumb to common cold, flu, that sort of thing, right? So with your plants, it's the same thing. If we build up the soil, we build up the strength of our plants, then they are far less likely to succumb to insult from the outside. So that's definitely definitely something that we need to remember. And we go back again to this idea of soil. So if anyone has any more questions about soil, I would be totally happy to answer those. We may get into compost next time. We may talk a little bit about watering, placement of plants, and Talia, you're interested in this planting vegetables and flowers or fruit and flowers, just incorporating it into the whole entity of your garden, having an edible landscape, which is highly popular, especially amongst people that don't have that much space. We could talk about that too next time, because that is something that a lot of people are very interested in, and also in companion planting. So I really appreciate everybody being here. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed our conversation today on soil. And remember, test your soil before you plant. Find out what kind of soil you have and what you might need to amend it. If you can't get your hands on manure, then see if you got people in town that have horses or cattle and they're willing to give you some. Get some coffee grinds from your local coffee shop. And the best kind of soil, Roger asks, what did I say? Is that loam. It's got the right amount of silt, sand, clay, and it is loaded with microorganisms. So Roger, do that worm test, a foot, and shovel it and put it on a piece of cardboard and see how many earthworms you have in there. You should have 10 or more. If not, you need to be doing more to encourage that biodiversity of microorganisms in your soil. We want our soil to be teeming with activity. So when we pull it away, we can actually look down and see things moving. And we know that those microorganisms in the soil are friends. They're not our enemies. They want to work with us and work with the plants to create healthy soil. So test your soil, test your pH, test your aeration, see how it drains. And if you haven't had a chance, don't forget to pick up copies of my garden books. The Secret Garden has this one has a lot of information on soil. And you were asking Talia about companion planting. This Secret Garden book will tell you how to plant, how to harvest, how to care for fruits and vegetables, and also what gets along with what, because that's also important when we plant a garden. So I've had a great time here today, and I hope you all have too. And yes, Talia, you can. She asked, can you get earthworms and put them in? You can, but you have to give them matter to decompose, and you have to have that environment that they want to thrive and they want to live in. You can also get worm castings. You can purchase worm castings and put them into your soil, which adds a lot of nutrients. But definitely, I do appreciate everybody being here today. And again, sorry about the technical issues. We will definitely try to get those taken care of for next time. And until then, have fun, getting your hands dirty. Somebody said that it was snowing where they were, so I'm sorry. I know that spring will come soon. And definitely join me again next week where we will talk more. And remember that plants are your friends, and getting your hands dirty feels so good. So take care, everybody. Good to see you. Bye bye.